All right, good evening. Get straight to the readings today. As you guys know, as it's written in the description, and I'll read it for you guys again today so we can get going. All right, so this is a Leftist Read-Along series hosted by me in pursuit of knowledge and growth. We read and analyze current events articles through the left perspective. You may show your support to Liberation News using the link provided below. You may also show your support to myself on this channel, but I prefer if you would click on the link for Liberation News so you can read along on the articles. Great Marxist quote, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs." All right, so let's move along today. There is a lot of articles. I've been looking into these. So let's see. As of this week, I have 6 articles to read. I don't think I'm going to get through all of them today, actually. I'm trying to limit these live streams to about an hour with personal opinions and analyzing. Seeing as we'll analyze and comment each one right after the article, and we'll see how it goes from there. If there is issues getting through all of them, then perhaps what I'll start doing is I'll start streaming on weekdays as well. Maybe I can go ahead and start streaming per article and make these shorter and just live stream them as they pop up, or I can do like Wednesdays and Sunday evenings, something like that. Or maybe I'll just dedicate to weeknights if it's easier for people. For me right now, it's easier on Sundays just to get through them. I can take my time, focus on them. But I also don't want to drag the live streams on. With that being said, today's article, we'll leave off with NYPD. We'll start off with NYPD can't stop the movement for free Palestine. And as usual, after each article, I'll give my analysis or short commentary of my thoughts. If people have thoughts, feel free to drop them on the comments, and we can start a conversation. All right. Give me a sec here. Okay. Again, this is liberationnews.org, newspaper of the Party of Socialism and Liberation. The article title, NYPD Can't Stop the Movement to Free Palestine. It's a joint statement by the publishers, Liberation News. Article dropped on February 4th, 2024. It's a 1-minute read, so we should be able to get through this pretty quickly. For the third week in a row, the New York City Police Department, NYPD, has attempted to use repression and arrest to intimidate the movement of Palestine in our city. The arrest of 7 demonstrators, including march organizers, today, when we took to the streets, as we have done on a daily and weekly basis for the past 4 months, is a violation of our First Amendment right to free speech and right to protest. We saw this on Friday, February 2nd as well, when the NYPD brutally cracked down on students and activists at Columbia University who have been fighting censorship and repression even by their university administration. New Yorkers have been organizing protests across the city on almost a daily basis in opposition to Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people and the complicity of our elected officials on a local and national level in arming and funding this genocide. This movement has brought together artists, nurses, writers, trade unions, students, doctors, tech workers, city workers, and so many others. It is clear that this diverse and vibrant movement has become a political liability for these corrupt politicians whose complicity with genocide has now been laid bare for the whole city to see. Mayor Eric Adams thinks that he can shut us up by arresting our leaders. Let me repeat that. Mayor Eric Adams thinks he can shut us up by arresting our leaders, violating our constitutional rights, and militarizing our city. He could not be further from the truth. We will continue organizing, mobilizing, and fighting with more unity, with more conviction, until the genocide ends and Palestine is free. Supporting teams, Palestine Youth Movement, Party for Socialism and Liberation, the People's Forum, National Students for Justice in Palestine, PAL, Al-Aqda, New York, New Jersey, the Palestine Rights to Return Coalition, Answer Coalition. Not much details there to analyze or respond to myself. Obviously, a big supporter of Free Palestine. And for people that always try to turn this on us and keep telling us that we're wrong, no, there's just no justification for it. To think that anything justifies the bombing and the killing of over, 10,000 children now? To think that is justifiable is just morally bankrupt cowardice. So there's just nothing you can tell me to say that I need to feel bad for Israel or feel bad for Jews. I have nothing against Jews. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm anti-Zionist. Clearly anti-Zionist, right? So yes, Free Palestine, fully support. And I fully support these marches, these protests, the disruption if necessary. And hopefully I will be able to join in some of these protests soon, instead of just sitting at my computer and not putting my actions where my speech is. Cool. Anyways, that is me in full support of this commentary, of this short article and update. Let's roll along to the next one. All right, the next one here, titled, "The Paris Proposal is an Israeli proposal in contradiction with the demands of the resistance." Written by Zoe Alexandra, posted on February 5th, 2024. It's a 5-minute read, so there's going to be some heavy details here. The photo here of Secretary of State Anthony J. Blinken meets with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Tel Aviv, January 9th, 2024. Credit U.S. State Department. So it's, in summary, it's a picture of two war criminals and genocidal maniacs. All right, reposted from People's Dispatch. And this reads, in the last weekend of January, intelligence officials from Israel, the United States, and Egypt, along with Qatari authorities, met in Paris, France, to discuss a proposal for a truce between Israel and Palestinian resistance. The possibility of a pause in Israel's nonstop bombing of Gaza, which in the past 4 months has killed over 20,000 people, including 10,000 children, has been met with cautious optimism by many who have watched Israel carry out innumerable atrocities with what seems like complete impunity. However, a deeper look at the details of the proposal paints a much less optimistic picture, as contradictory news reports emerge on the proposal and its future. It is crucial to understand what is on the table and what implications it has for the people of Palestine. The proposal. The Paris proposal is not a ceasefire agreement, but a humanitarian pause broken into 3 phases. The first phase would see a 45-day pause in all hostilities, along with the release of the Israeli hostages in Gaza who are under the age of 19 or under, or wounded, in exchange for an agreed-upon number of Palestinian prisoners. The number of days of the pause in the second phase has not been determined, but it envisages the release of Israeli military personnel in exchange for an agreed-upon number of Palestinian prisoners and an increase in the amount of aid flowing into Gaza. According to a report in Al-Akhbar, there has also been talk of the second phase, including the withdrawal of Israeli forces from dense residential areas, the creation of a no-fly zone in Gaza, and a guarantee for the return of displaced Palestinians in Rafah to northern Gaza and Gaza City. The focus of the third phase is to be on the exchange of bodies of the dead for the release of more Palestinian prisoners. This phase would also include a provision to begin dialogue to potentially reach a permanent ceasefire. Apprehensions. The Paris proposal has been met with apprehension from people across Palestine and supporters of the Palestinian cause. Mahmoud, a Palestinian left leader, told me, first and foremost, we have to name sick that the Paris proposal is an Israeli proposal in contradiction with the demands of the resistance. The demands, which have been outlined by Hamas spokespersons over the past 4 months and ratified by the Palestinian resistance factions, have been completely disregarded in this proposal. The most essential of these are permanent end to the Israel aggression in Gaza, the full withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, the lifting of the 18-year siege on Gaza, and for the unlimited entry of aid, including for the enclave's buildings. Following the fulfillment of these demands, they can call for a negotiation Following the fulfillment of these demands, they call for a negotiation for the all-for-all prisoner swap. For Mahmoud, not only are these demands not addressed in the proposal or left undefined, as in the case with the entry of aid and the number of Palestinian prisoners to be released in each phase, but some of the terms would actually see Israel trying to achieve politically and diplomatically what they couldn't achieve militarily. For instance, while the agreement would possibly provide for the withdrawal of Israeli forces from major roads in urban areas, they would remain in other areas. This means that they're going to maintain control over positions inside the Gaza Strip that they plan to turn into a buffer zone, Mahmoud explained. He emphasized this proposal would be a huge loss for the Palestinian people. 4 months of fighting, the killing of more than 30,000 people, and the destruction of tens of thousands of homes and infrastructure to just reach a temporary ceasefire without freeing the prisoners or changing or improving the condition of the Palestinian lives on their prior to October 7th, I don't think that such an agreement would be acceptable by the majority of the Palestinian parties or people, and it would be met with resistance. Israel faces pressure. Netanyahu's war cabinet is currently reviewing the proposal to determine some of the undefined provisions of the future of its war on Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli officials have had varying responses to their own proposal, with some far-right ministers publicly rejecting it, and for that matter, any pause in the country's military campaign. The reality is that Israel is facing a tremendous amount of pressure to end its genocidal war, and the international level, more and more world leaders are joining humanitarian organizations and the United Nations in condemning Israel and calling for an immediate ceasefire. Israel is also facing regional pressure as Yemeni, Lebanese, and Iraqi resistance groups have been launching different types of operations against it in solidarity with Palestinian people. The regional dynamic of the war is likely to escalate, with the United States conducting retaliatory strikes against these groups. While Netanyahu and other ministers are defiant in the face of the ruling of the International Court of Justice and resolution of the United Nations calling for a ceasefire, the Israeli government also faces significant challenges domestically. A key source of pressure are the families of the hostages who have demanded that Netanyahu's government reach a prisoner exchange deal at any cost. Added to this is the fact that despite the destruction and bloodshed it has unleashed, Israel has still failed to achieve its military objective in Gaza, the complete destruction of the resistance and infrastructure, and the return of the hostages without negotiations and through a military operation. 4 months later, they haven't realized any of these goals, and their forces are exhausted, Mahmoud told me. He explained, all of these reasons are pushing the Israelis through allies to actually engage in dialogue and reach an agreement that would enable them to be victorious at a certain level. Whatever they couldn't achieve through the military operation, they are now trying to achieve through political avenues. Pressure from the United States, Israel's biggest political and financial backer, to end fighting in Gaza is also a significant part of the calculation. Joe Biden's administration has been under heavy criticism from broad sections of society, including traditional supporters of the Democratic Party, for its stubborn support to Israel. Many analysts predict that Biden's response to the genocide in Gaza could even cost him re-election in November. On January 29th, just a day after the Paris proposal was first drafted, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, during a joint press conference with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, said, "I believe the Paris proposal is a strong one and compelling one that, again, offers some hope we can get back to this process, but Hamas will have to make its own decisions." What's next? The Paris proposal is still being reviewed and discussed by both parties, and it is likely that in the coming days, they will make announcements regarding the viability and future of the document. As U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to visit the region and has reiterated the importance of securing a humanitarian pause that includes the release of hostages held by Hamas, it is likely there will be increased pressure from some version of this proposal to move forward. However, as Mahmoud stated firmly, Palestinians are not going to accept any truce if it doesn't ensure the ending of the siege, if it doesn't ensure the freedom of our political prisoners, and bettering the conditions inside of Gaza. People on the ground in Gaza and Palestine and the Arab region will not celebrate such a deal that is only about a temporary ceasefire without the fulfillment of other demands that the resistance and the Palestinian people rallied behind since the beginning of this battle. Okay. My personal comments on this, my analysis. It's not a war. It's a genocide. It's a massacre. They're bombing women and children. They're bombing buildings. They're bombing colleges. They're bombing hospitals. They're bombing anything they want to bomb so they can later say we were looking for Hamas insurgents or Hamas military. There is no evidence. There is no footage released from the Israel side that they are being retaliated on. It's straight up just them bombarding normal people, civilians, bombarding neighborhoods, bombarding infrastructure. It's really just a straight up genocide. And yeah, I'm in full support of Hamas demands on this. There should definitely be a full withdrawal of Israel and Gaza. I mean, like, the bar has been set so low. and the Overton window has been moved so far by Israel so that when they offer crumbs, Palestinians will see it as a victory. But no, there is no victory in being oppressed just a little bit more or being occupied just a little bit less. I mean, being oppressed just a little bit less or occupied just a little bit less is not freedom. It's not it's not independence, it's not free will. So Palestinian people want to be free, and that's what they deserve. If they didn't want, if Israel didn't want this to happen, then they shouldn't have been occupying the land for over 75 years. That's straight up where it started. That's straight up why it's happening. This didn't happen because Hamas just has some religious vendetta against Israel and Jews. No, it happened because Hamas wants Gaza and Palestine to be free of occupation. All right. So maybe Israel shouldn't have funded Hamas to begin with. Yeah. So people need to look back at the history and realize that this didn't start with Hamas. Hamas didn't start this. Israel started this with the occupation, regardless if it was the UN or American funding. However it started, Israel started it. You can go back in the timeline and review over and over again how the land grab started and how it's progressed and how much or how little land is left for Palestinians uh, in Gaza. All right. So yeah, in full support of this article. Um, let's see. Let's go to the next one. All right. I'm going to take a sip for a sec. The next one reads Tales from the Pages of COINTELPRO. Written by Eugene Pourier, February 5th, 2024. It's about a 6-minute read. In parentheses or in quotes, oftentimes we lose sight of who our real enemies are and give vent to our emotional responses, by Safia Bunkari. In quotations, circulate to educate to liberate. This was the constant intonation of Sam Napier, circulation manager of the Black Panther newspaper. As one Panther leader noted, Sam was the main reason why shortly after it began, the paper had a 200,000 plus copies per week distribution. Napier was a Napier was a beloved member of the party, which is why many were taken by surprise when his body was found on March of 1971, tied to a chair, showing bullet wounds and signs of torture. After they left, perhaps while he was still alive, his killer set the building on fire. Sam Napier was one of the victims of a concentrated effort to destroy the Black Panthers by the U.S. government as part and parcel of an effort to destroy the entire Black liberation movement and any other radicals who dared raise their voices against the U.S. ruling class and their imperial policies. COINTELPRO has mainly become synonymous with assassinations and illegal surveillance. What can be overlooked, and certainly is understudy, is our social media era. In our social media era, is that the vast majority of COINTELPRO's offensive actions were, in the words of Huey Newton, to sow dissension. As Black Liberation Army leader Safia Bukhari stated, COINTELPRO scored a bullseye with Napier's death, which has central to its campaign to create an East-West Coast or Newton to Cleaver split to debilitate the BPP. The origins of the dispute between the two major Panther leaders was based on diverging assessments of the political movement in the early 70s. The FBI moved aggressively to turn the political split into a deep personal one, using a range of accusations sent via anonymous or falsely signed letters to make both sides think the other was looking to kill them, and even worse, maybe working with the police. For the 3 weeks leading to Napier's murder, a barrage of anonymous letters flowed from FBI field offices in response to the urging from FBI headquarters. Napier sided with Huey Newton once Cleaver was expelled early in 1971. Most New York Panthers, however, supported Cleaver. The situation was extremely tense. Deputy Minister for Defense Robert Webb, who had sided with Cleaver, was murdered a few days before Napier in highly suspicious circumstances during a confrontation with alleged supporters of Newton. Napier was murdered a few days later in what was widely considered retaliation for Webb's death. By mid-March, just after the murders, the FBI was gloating in internal memos about how they had succeeded in making the Cleaver-Newton split irreconcilable. In addition to sowing dissension with the Panthers, COINTELPRO used similar tactics, in particular fake letters to sow dissension between the Panthers and other Black organizations. At the height of Fred Hampton's campaign to win over street organizations to the revolutionary movement, the FBI intervened. FBI agents sent letters to Black Peace Stone Ranger leader Jeff Port, claiming that the Panthers were constantly insulting him and had placed a hit on him. FBI agents felt this was a productive tactic because the Rangers were violence-prone, shooting, and the like is second nature. In 1970, after the U.S. organization in Los Angeles had killed two Panthers, John Huey and Bunchy Carter, the FBI looked to capitalize on the situation by having informants make sure U.S. was appropriately and discreetly advising of the time and location of BPP activities in order that the two organizations might be brought together and thus grant nature to the opportunity to take due course. These episodes show just how devastating state intervention is in political disputes can be. It offers an important lesson in how we conduct struggles over political line. The more reckless, the more personal, the more potentially damaging the rhetoric used to attack political opponents. This serves the open door wider and wider for the state to enter and disorganize revolutionary movements. Big tech and the feds. The danger is especially high with the massive proliferation of anonymous accounts, bot networks, and AI-generated content. Why are we seeing one post as opposed to any other? Who determines what is put in front of us of the most eyeballs? All of this heavily affected the tone, and content of the discourse. Obviously, knowledge production and the formation of consciousness on these platforms is not controlled by us, but by the same monopoly capitalist corporations that are our enemies. These companies are deeply embedded with the State Security Service of the U.S. government, which direct the flow content moderation for their own agendas. Twitter, for instance, directly assisted with the U.S. military influence operations. The Department of Homeland Security and the State Department, in partnership with Stanford University, made specific recommendations on how companies like Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Reddit should censor posts. One report noted Facebook has recruited dozens of individuals from the Central Intelligence Agency, as well as many more from other agencies like the FBI and Department of Defense. These hires are primarily in high political sensitive sectors such as trust, security, and content moderation. TikTok is flooded with NATO officials, former FBI agents abound at Twitter, and Reddit is led by a former war planner for the NATO think tank, the Atlantic Council. COINTELPRO 2.0. It is naive to assume that the ruling class and its institutions are not attempting to sow dissension in the ranks of the movements challenging capitalism and imperialism today. The real question is, how will our movement respond? Our first defense is organization. Shared communities with common values create the foundations for collective evaluation, struggle, and accountability. It creates a counter pressure to that of social media. Checking in with our comrades to evaluate the issues from all sides, to speak or respond based on your own strategic goals around your shared values, to consider the implications of the impact of responding or speaking publicly to the broader movements your organization is part of. All of this is part of security, as Safia Bukhari notes. In quotations, my definition, security means the freedom from danger, fear, and anxiety. Individual and organizational safety, as well as being begin as well as excuse me. Individual and organizational safety and well-being begin with knowledge of what you're about, what the organization is about, your limitations, the organization's limitations, your strengths and the organization's strengths. Knowledge is key to security. These are also the communities where we can build trust, sharing our own human side, making us less vulnerable to innuendo, and creating greater basis for understanding and forgiveness. Comrade Safia continues, again in quotations. The enemy will use anything and everything they know about you to their advantage. As we shed ego and survive all the knocks of revealing these little truths about ourselves to one another, we become stronger, our organization becomes stronger and more secure, and our vote becomes realizable because we have begun to sublimate the big I to the collective us or we. End quote. For political prisoner David Gilbert, former political prisoner David Gilbert offers in his memoirs an experience of dealing with the ultimate betrayal, a comrade who, after intense torture and extreme pressure, offered evidence to the police, recognizing he had to cut a deal but broken under torture. Other imprisoned comrades, Sekou Odinga and Kawasi Balagu, offered the individual. End quote. Nurture and understanding to regain his sanity. He was obviously broken, visibly trembling in front of the COs and police, but we hoped that with discussion he could come to grips with what had happened. Such openness would enable him to debrief the defense in order to avoid further surprises and to eventually forgive himself and rebuild as a politically conscious person. End quote. He notes that unfortunately the person's start quote, bravado didn't allow him to admit that he had broken and talked. Without facing that, he couldn't rebuild and remained crippled by his self-hatred. That dishonesty and fear left the FBI's hooks still deeply embedded in him. End quote. This episode underscores Bukhari's point about the importance of organization and internal honesty, respect, and understanding. Taking these points as foundational, we also must apply history to our current reality. If totally anonymous accounts are spreading damage, accusations about known and established radical groups or their members, that should give one pause when considering them. Further, individuals who are accountable to nothing tangible and use their platforms to make unverifiable claims and recklessly sow division should also give us pause. Whether someone is ill-intentioned or not, it's clear that these are exactly the type of practices used to tear down radical movements for decades. That alone is enough to raise a red flag. Nothing, of course, can solve this problem for us completely and for all time. Every successful movement faces repression and takes certain losses. Organizations in the wellspring of successful struggle, hence why state repression, let me start that over. Organization is the wellspring for successful struggle, hence why state repression focuses first and foremost on weakening our collective situations. The question is, can we build organizations that are resilient? One aspect of that is making it as difficult as possible for lies. Let me start that again. One aspect of that is making it as difficult as possible for lies, innuendo, slander, and mischaracterization to spread and create resentments that lead to tragedy, like our examples above. All right, and there's a few citation links here to some of the articles. Some of the books mentioned: Huey Newton, War Against the Panthers, A Study of Repression in America. And there's links provided. There's also a link to a book. There's a lot of website links provided at the bottom here as well. Number 11, it's another book. Sophia Abkari, The War Before, The True Life Story of Becoming a Black Panther, Keeping the Faith in Prison and Fighting for Those Left Behind. Right? And the last book here, David Gilbert, Love and Struggle, My Life in SDS, The Weather Underground and Beyond, written and published in 2012. Yeah, so they were mentioning here about state repression, right? And one of the big tools of state repression is the corporations themselves, the social media corporations, which are huge. Don't forget that they wash each other's hands. It's a cycle of elitists and oligarchs, right? You can consider the government kind of like the puppets, the sock puppets of the oligarchs, of the elitists, of the big time elitists. For example, I'm not going to mention any social media groups, but this is just an example of how it works. We know that corporations donate to elections, and that's how they buy our politicians, right? And then our politicians create policies to return the favor for those corporations. The same way that these politicians make policies like subsidizing or grants or loans for these corporations or tax break incentives, then the corporations have an incentive or a responsibility to return the favor to politicians or in a grander scale to the state to maintain control. How do they return these favors? By doing exactly what the state says that needs to be done when it's necessary to keep the system alive, to keep the system working, to keep the gears grinding the way they're supposed to. And the best way to do that is social media sites collaborating with the state to maintain control, right? So they help each other out. It really is the elitist against the working class. And people don't get this. People don't understand still that you need to stop idolizing these two major parties and stop idolizing their candidates. Stop making them into heroes that they're not. Just because they had successful businesses or made great deals or had great careers doesn't mean that they're great people, and especially definitely doesn't mean that they're here to represent the working class people. On the contrary, people that get that famous, that important, that rich, usually step over a lot of people, walk over a lot of people, throw a lot of people under the bus to get where they are, especially when it comes to the two major parties. My suggestion, my personal point of view here, based on my analysis and what I've learned and what I've been reading, is that we need to reject the two-party system. We need to stop voting for these elitists. We need to stop idolizing them. And we need to start electing working class people. In other words, our neighbors. If our neighbors show signs of leadership and they're working class people and they are spreading the right message on the right issues, then we need to support and elect them instead of supporting and electing big shots on TV that maybe had a great reality TV show or maybe sold a lot of pillows or whatever it may be, right? Don't forget that the greatest reason we have so much harm, so much pain, and so much suffering, even in a capitalist system that is so resourceful, is because of wealth disparity. And wealth disparity simply means that there's too much at the top, that a few have too much and don't spread enough wealth to the bottom, to the working class, to the least fortunate, right? Instead, they expect us to donate. Why should we donate when there's billions and billions of dollars just being like offshored or just held into funds of billionaires that are doing nothing with it or just being philanthropists and spending it on fancy yachts or acting like they're helping the world out building new cars, ridiculous stuff. Obviously, we can talk about this in more depth in hours, but this is what people just don't clearly see. They idolize elitists, they idolize parties, they idolize figures, as well as they idolize a capitalist system instead of people being open to debate and really criticize the system for its flaws, right? Capitalism, like socialism, like communism, have many flaws. But the biggest flaw in capitalism is that it does not care about redistributing the wealth to the working class people to make sure they're making living wages, and it doesn't redistribute the wealth to lift up the poor, as opposed to other systems like communism or socialism that its core central goals are to uplift the working class and redistribute all the wealth from the top to the bottom so that we don't have these issues that we have. Let's think about it here. If capitalism is such a great, successful system, then why do we have over 600,000 poor, homeless people in America? Why are there people in so much debt that uh, they only are living life one check at a time, right? Why is there so much credit card debt? Why is there so much medical debt? Like, come on, we're in the most advanced civilization in history, and we're still charging people for medical care because we decided we needed to make it a business instead of just taking care of people. Don't we already have enough things to make a business out of? I mean, you're making businesses out of the most helpful things that should just help humanity and should be a given, like education and health, and just a decent living standard. That's my well, actually, I ranted away from what the Black Panthers did here and the CIA and the intrusion. Yeah, so COINTELPRO 2.0, which is what this article is really about, is it's just the next step toward what the major top secret agencies in America are doing to keep a capitalist system working the way it does. To divide the people. It divides the working class. It divides the working class organizations that want to work together, and that's how they win. They divide and conquer. And the best thing for us to do is to always scrutinize, critique, and evaluate opinions that we view and make sure that they're supported by facts. Make sure that the people that are saying these things are supported by facts and they just aren't making up things. Because there's people all over the websites right now, all over the social media streams that'll just speak things, total nonsense, as fact. They'll say that as fact, but then they won't bring you up a report that legitimizes it as a fact, right? We know many of those. Many of them we call bread tubers. Many of them we call CIA agents or CIA plants. Uh, a lot of them we just call neolibs. Well, that's my thoughts on that. I probably ranted too much on this, but I haven't read an article like this in a while in regards to the Black Panthers, the movement, and how COINTELPRO is really a beast, a monster that needs to be conquered. And the only way to conquer it is really working class solidarity, actually using things to be more analytical. Me personally, I've not recommending it to anybody, uh, but something that I use in my life to try to be more open-minded and more critical is Stoicism, right? Stoicism isn't for everybody, but it's a study of philosophy that just shows people how to be good people. But it's a lot of it is based on living in the now and controlling yourself and not letting your emotions run amok and not letting your emotions dictate your actions, right? Stepping back from emotions and analyzing things for what they really are. Once you're able to set your emotions aside or control your emotions so that they don't overpower you and make you act reactionary, then you can actually analyze things and come back to things with a clearer mind and give proper responses and share proper information and have proper conversations. The worst thing people can do is be reactionary and just snap back and reply back to things that they don't agree with, as opposed to taking it in, saying that you're not ready to respond something, and then coming back and responding. That's what's beautiful about prepared debates is that you can prepare for responses, as opposed to just people that are talking heads that just have the bully pulpit online that just say whatever they want and don't want to debate. or they're just bully debaters, and instead of letting people speak, they just speak over people because they don't want people to get in their actual factual information. When people interrupt a lot, uh, it just shows that they don't have self-control to speak or to have a debate, or they don't want to have that self-control because they want to have the upper hand by being bullies, and just talking over people, right? Uh, okay, so this is my thoughts on this article. Let's go on to a next one. All right, let's see here. All right, so uh, Netanyahu rejects truce, promises worst massacre yet in Rafah. Uh, Written by Walter Smolarek, February 7th, 2024, 2-minute read. All right, so this is an update on an article that I just read a little while ago, in the beginning of this stream. All right. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu dashed hopes today that he would accept a truce proposal put forward by the Palestinian resistance and instead vowed to press on with a new phase of the genocide that promises to be the most deadly and horrific yet. Speaking alongside U.S. Secretary of State Blinken today, Netanyahu announced that the Israeli war machine would press on until the end, adding that there is no other solution besides complete victory. He went on to say that in order to do that, he was ordering Israeli troops to prepare to operate in the southernmost part of Gaza, Rafah. Netanyahu's comments echoed statements from his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, who said on Monday, we will also reach the places where we have not yet fought in the central and southern strip, and especially the last center of gravity, and especially the last center of gravity left in Hamas' hands, Rafah. It is hard to put into words the vast suffering and widespread death that such a military operation would be bound to inflict. As the U.S. supplied Israeli military rampage across Gaza, the population has been pushed further and further south. Gaza is divided into 5 governorates. Rafah is the region further south that borders Egypt. Before the war, Rafah city's population was less than 200,000, and under 300,000 lived in the whole Rafah region. But since the genocide began, the majority of Gaza's population has fled there, swelling the governorate's population to 1.5 million. Rafah is tiny, about 25 square miles. That's roughly the same physical size as Newark, New Jersey, and about half the size of San Francisco. The population density in Rafah is now double the density of New York City. The Palestinian refugees who have been forced into this area by the U.S.-Israeli onslaught live under the most terrible conditions. Families are forced to sleep in makeshift tents or simply out in the open. Starvation and disease are rife. The spokesperson for the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs called Rafah a pressure cooker of despair. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that the situation in Rafah was a humanitarian nightmare. And now the Israeli military is pledging to smash into the area with full force. The loss of life could easily be the most horrific yet. And as the trad population is subjected to nonstop and indiscriminate Israeli bombardment from the air, land, and sea, a bombardment carried out with weapons paid for by U.S. tax dollars. The offensive on Rafah also has a sinister political motivation behind it. Since the genocide commenced, leaders of the Israeli regime have openly advocated for the permanent removal of the Palestinian population from Gaza, sometimes referring to this euphemistically as the voluntary migration of Palestinians out of Gaza. Under the twisted vision, most Gazans would be displaced into the Sinai Peninsula, the region of Egypt directly across the border from Rafah. The Palestinian people have been steadfast in their resistance to refuse to leave their land. The Palestinian people have been steadfast in their resistance and refuse to leave their land. Israel, with the support of the Biden administration, is amping up violence to terrifying new heights in a vain attempt to terrorize Palestinians into submission. Joe Biden, Israel's main weapons supplier and principal political sponsor, has the power to stop the horrors of an offensive against Rafah from becoming a reality. As the apartheid regime prepares for what it hopes will be the blood-soaked finale of their war on Gaza, now is the time to rise up in solidarity with even more strength than before. This is just horrific to think what Israel is doing here, the plans to just, so you tell everybody to run to Rafah, and now you're going to bombard Rafah with the hopes that they all move either silently into Egypt or just die peacefully while you say that you're bombing terrorists, right? It's just disgusting. It's disgusting what the U.S. is funding, and this is really just a mask-off moment because this is really what U.S. Is about. This is what it's always been about, and this is what it's always going to be about because this is what capitalism is about. It's about control and power to maximize profit, and they do not care about lives. They do not care about children. A lot of capitalists living in the U.S. Will just side with Israel because they do not want to confront the truth, and they will say that all Palestinians should be eradicated because they're terrorists or they're not, or that they're subhuman. And what can you say to people like that have said that they are morally bankrupt for even siding with a group that is okay with bombarding children, right? Or women, or people for that matter that are not even carrying weapons. Yeah, it's disgusting. And it's disgusting what the way that they're trying to coerce Egypt or other nations into accepting Palestinians or accepting genocide and calling it a freedom movement or a democratic movement of defense or even calling it a war is disgusting. This is not a war. This is a massacre. And it's a genocide and it's total war. It's war crimes. That's what it is. It's criminal. But there is no real defense here. Palestine is not shooting or firing back anything. You know, the people of Hamas are not military soldiers. They're peoples in sandals fighting for their freedom and for their land, trying to gain some respect or trying to get the world to see what monsters are really running this world in regards to Israel and the U.S. state. Not much else I can say about this, except is Joe Biden going to do anything personally? I don't think he is. I mean, I think they're just moving the goalposts slowly, seeing how far they can go before other states act, before other nations and countries act, against Israel, against sanctions. They're really playing a very tricky chess game here with the world population, really. And in the end, they're not going to care how many people, how people think about them, as long as they still maintain control, power, and it's profitable. That's the way, that has always been the U.S. agenda, and that's the way it will always be under capitalism. It's totally ghoulish, and I don't support it. Even being a U.S. citizen, I don't support it. I think there's a better way. I think stop all the interventions, stop all the funding around the world, let the countries sort themselves out their own way. And the only time you should be sending aid to countries is if you actually want to share your technology to advance theirs so they can have better civilizations, so they can have better aid in regards to education and medicine. But when you give other countries more weapons or more fundings for weapons, it's not about freedom. It's not about democracy. Carpet bombing other nations is not about freedom or democracy. It's about making a profit and maintaining control. And everybody knows that, and it's morally bankrupt. That's my thought on that. All right, stop sending money to Ukraine is the next one. You know what? Yeah, I'm going to get through these today. I'm just going to get through them, and what I'm going to do, if By middle of the week, if there's more than 2 or 3 articles already posted, then I'll probably just do a midweek stream and then do a Sunday stream. But let's get another sip here. Man, I can't emphasize how morally bankrupt and disgusting it is to be a Zionist. Honestly, in my opinion, seeing everything that Zionism is about right now, like it's practically like you're supporting being a Nazi, but it's like a next gen Nazi. It's like uh, uh, how do you explain that? You were oppressed and you were almost eradicated by Nazis, and now you're doing the same fascist things. It's crazy. It's crazy. I'm thankful for the level-headed Jewish community out there. Let me say that that actually believes in peace, that actually practices what they preach, and that are asking for a ceasefire, and they're asking for Palestine to be free as well. Uh, those are good Jews. Those are honest people. Those are good people, and I totally support them along with any other religion out there, any other practice out there that supports peace. Okay, and supports not interventions, but holding hands across the world to actually help people. There's a lot of people saying that, oh, well, you're supporting people that don't believe in the same peace that you believe. That doesn't mean I should intervene and carpet bomb them like a total monster. No, you just let them be and you lead by example. When you teach people, uh, when you help people, regardless of what religions they may be, they will be more inclined to help you as well, especially if you're a superpower, especially if you have the technology. Um, there will always be extreme radicals that will always want to exterminate with some religion or another, but that is not the general population. The extreme radicals, in my opinion, are mostly in power, in politics, and they are the wrong people to be controlling the world. All right. Stop sending money to Ukraine. Eugene Poirier, February 8th, 2024, 2-minute read. The Democrat and Republican leadership in the United States Senate is maneuvering to send $60 billion to Ukraine, despite the war essentially being lost and regardless of the fact that many key programs of the U.S. working class remain underfunded. Throwing good money after bad is justified in Washington by myth-making. The idea that Ukraine is involved in some great fight against evil, the myths hide the reality of a conflict provoked by the United States and European powers who deliberately blocked avenues for peace and propped up a corrupt neoliberal government for the dubious purpose of controlling the entire world. One of the easiest ways to judge the state of the war is to examine the various maps tracking the war's progress. What you will notice is, despite tens of billions of dollars in every type of advanced military equipment, the front line has not significantly moved in over a year. And now Russia seems to be incrementally taking back several areas along the front line. Ukraine's military has been through the meat grinder. One Ukrainian politician told ABC News that 500,000 Ukrainians have been wounded or killed, and that 30,000 Ukrainian troops are now being killed or badly wounded per month. Foreign Affairs, the in-house imperialist journalist of the U.S. ruling class, bluntly stated that Russia has stopped Ukraine's momentum. The author of the article further noted, the implications of this for Ukraine are grim. Ukrainian soldiers told the New York Times, the toll is heavy for all units along the front. Almost everyone has been wounded or survived a narrow escape in recent months, and that they do not have enough men. In other words, Ukraine is losing and prospects for a turnaround are as much hopes and dreams as grounded analysis. Even people who have Putin, even people who hate Putin are saying things like, in Ukraine, democracy is largely suspended. And this isn't something that started with the war. In fact, As early as 2021, Zelensky's government banned most of the television channels that criticized him and took actions to kneecap the main opposition party. Also, before the war, Zelensky pushed the IMF-backed proposal to sell off the country's land to international agribusiness, increased water and electricity prices, and attacked unions. Unsurprisingly, as the war has gone on, Zelensky has proposed further selling and country for parts of the Western corporations. Further selling the country for parts of the Western corporations. He even went so far as to go to the New York Stock Exchange to announce he was selling off 400 billion in state property. On top of all this, Zelensky and all the post-2014 governments in Ukraine have embraced pro-Nazi political movements. All in all, this is not exactly a glorious crusade for freedom. Given all this, what possible interest could workers in the US have for supporting increased militarism in Ukraine? We are told we must stop Russia. Why? Well, according to successive US administration for decades, because Russia has different ideas about the region and the world. Further, the issue of why isn't happening in a vacuum. Instead, it's happening at a time where for the money we are spending on Ukraine, we could hire tens of thousands of teachers, keep tens of thousands of families from going homeless, replace all the lead pipes in Wisconsin and New Jersey, give striking workers unemployment insurance, and provide millions of mothers and infants with proper nutrition and care. And this would still leave money left to spend. With Ukraine funding hanging in the balance in the Congress, now is a perfect time for those who want to empower workers and end the capitalist domination of our domestic and foreign policy to demand the U.S. drop its support for the failed war policy in Ukraine. Hashtag anti-war. Yeah, the war in Ukraine is just a proxy war funded by the U.S. and NATO to try to weaken Russia, which has totally backfired. And not only just to weaken Russia, but printing up and sending billions of dollars to Ukraine just so Ukraine could buy more arms so that we can have more military arms contracts, just enriches the 1% and does not enrich or lift up the working class in America. That's the straight up truth. As described at the bottom, at the end of the article, that America is sending money to practically support a corrupt government like Ukraine that has gone practically full Nazi is ridiculous as well. But that's exactly what's happening. We're living in an upside down that is totally bananas, where the mask is off for America as well. You know, the mask is off again because history teaches us through American history books that America rose up against the Nazis to defend the Jews. It was totally based on because America was attacked by Japan in Pearl Harbor, and America was defending their capital, not the Jews. So this is just another mask off moment that shows that America doesn't care about morals. It doesn't care about who's right or who's wrong. It cares about how to maintain power and how to make sure that they maintain power by literally maintaining evolving or growing countries weaker so that they don't grow into power. And that's why we as American citizens have to actually be open about this and actually be against these wars, because they don't benefit us, the working class, as human beings around the world united. They only benefit the oligarchs and the elitists, and they know this. They're doing this intentionally. These aren't missteps entirely. These are intentional steps that they make. They know that thousands upon thousands of Ukrainians are dying for nothing. Even if they're fascists or Nazis or racists, I don't care. They're still human beings. There's still people that can be redeemed. There's still people that can be rehabilitated, educated, and can live better lives. They're people we should care about because they're working class people being used as cannon fodder, being used as pawns for imperialist systems. That's not to say that Russia doesn't have its problems as well. It does. but Russia's not the one funding proxy wars and putting military bases all over the world to try to control other nations. Okay? And let's not forget that Russia militarily went into Ukraine as well because of fears of NATO putting bases on the Russian-Ukrainian border. Um, there's a lot. There's a lot happening here. A good documentary, if you don't have the time to read a full book, is read Ukraine on Fire by Oliver Stone. Watch that documentary. It's a great documentary, in my opinion, to get you up to speed as to what was happening in Ukraine with Russia in regards to 2000 to the present. There's also a lot of history about the Berlin Wall, why East and West Germany were divided, and why they were reunited when the USSR fell. So those are all good, important points to read and catch up on to understand why this war is happening, an unnecessary war that never had to happen, that only happened because of U.S. breaking treaties, laws, and promises with Russia, to be more exact and direct to the point about it. Okay. So as written here at the end by Eugene, all these billions of dollars that are printed up and funding wars could be funding actual reconstruction and rehabilitation of America, educating kids, getting people out of homelessness, creating jobs to we should have a beautiful United States where all the bridges are new, all the buildings are nice, all the streets are clean, because we have the resources and we have the manpower. But instead, we send all this funding to fight proxy wars. And we use poor people as an example of what happens when you go against the state, when you go against capitalism. So it's either play along and survive or resist and end up homeless. Well, it's not like that. I think as working class people, we can be united to make a change. All right, one more article for today. We did it. We got through all the articles. Pretty sure I got through all the articles. I read the Paris proposal. I read Tales from the Pages of COINTELPRO. That was a great one today. Netanyahu rejects truce like the monster he is. Stop sending money to Ukraine. I hope so. I hope quickly. Last article here. Watch this be like a 20-minute read. Let me check on how the live stream is going. All right. Live stream seems good. All right. Last article. My last sip of tea. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger leave ECOWAS. What moves are being made in the region? Written by Monica Johnson and Deja Gaston, February 8th, 2024. 4-minute read. Photo, Burkina Faso soldiers standing in formation. All right. On January 28th, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, in a televised statement, withdrew from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. This comes after the three nations withdrew from the G5 Sahel, a coalition of 5 West African states formed under the pretext of tackling Islamic insurgencies in the region. The newly formed alliance of the Sahel states, AES, went on to state that the G5 Sahel as an organization is failing to achieve its objectives. Worse, the legitimate ambitions of our countries of making the G5 Sahel a zone of security and development are hindered. After withdrawing, the remaining members of the G5 Sahel, Chad, and Mauritania effectively dissolved the coalition on December 6. The additional blow to ECOWAS signals further detachment from these Western-backed African institutions. In their televised statement, the AES put forth the ECOWAS has moved away from the ideals of its founding fathers and Pan-Africanism. Furthermore, ECOWAS, under the influence of foreign powers betraying its founding principles, has become a threat to its member states and its population whose happiness it's supposed to ensure. This statement reflects an affirmation of the military governments to prioritize their national sovereignty and responsibility to chart an independent path from Western-backed puppet institutions. AES looks to alternative economic and political partners independent from the West. Before the departure, there had been continuous measures taken to strengthen the region's connections outside of the West, mutual cooperation economically, politically, and technologically between the Sahel countries and countries like Russia, China, and recently Iran present new opportunities for the AES. On January 25th, a ceremony between Russia and Burkina Faso's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Regional Cooperation, Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré, however you say that, and its Minister of Communications, Culture, Arts, and Tourism, Rentalba, Jean-Emmanuel Ouedraogo, took place. Its outcome resulted in a donation of 25,000 tons of whole grain shipped to Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou. Russia also deployed 100 troops to the capital city as well. This follows the July 2023 Second Russia-Africa Summit, where nations like Somalia also received 25,000 tons of wheat, while Russia also focused on increasing supplies of wheat, fertilizer, and fuel to Mali. In an interview, transitional president of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, rejected allegations made by President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, regarding Burkina Faso's purported involvement with Russian mercenaries Wagner Group. Traoré expressed the transitional government's deep commitment to Burkina Faso's sovereignty, stating, "If it was a deal to serve one master in place of another, I would have rather died than do that, because we say our homeland or death." I gotta learn how to say this name. Traoré? Traoré? Maybe it's Traoré. Let's find out. Sorry, I gotta do this. It's killing me. All right. Let's see, how do you say it?
Traoré.
Traoré. All right, so now I know it's Traoré. Sorry. All right. Let's see how it is. Back to the reading. Toward the end of January, the newly appointed Prime Minister of Niger, Ali Lamine Zain, visited Iran and met with President Ibrahim Raisi. They inked several deals which expanded cooperation in the economic, political, and health sectors. Iran also began preliminary steps to reopen Niger's embassy in Tehran, which signals a move to strengthen the two countries' growing relations. Iran's first vice president, Mohammad Mobir, expressed Iran's willingness to help Niger overcome punitive economic measures imposed by Western-backed ECOWAS following the popularly supported coup in Nigeria last July. Mogber highlighted his country is opposed to the cruel sanctions which are imposed by the dominant system. Despite the levied sanctions to one of the poorest nations in the world, the people of Niger, even in the face of rising food and medicine prices, are committed to the process of charting a new course independent from the Western directives. EU-backed immigration law overturned. Last of French troops exit Niger. Niger further signaled a departure from European directives in November by overturning a 2015 law that criminalized migration through the Agadez hub. This has forced thousands to travel through far more dangerous desert pathways in other countries and destroyed the economy of Agadez and nearby areas. Because European countries wanted Nigeria to stem the flow of migrants from Africa, they compelled the country to pass this law, which prosecuted many nationals for simply cooking meals or giving rides to migrants. Now, Western media outlets are sounding the alarm and fear mongering over supposed dangerous influxes of migrants, but local residents celebrate. In December of last year, the last of the French troops in Nigeria were recalled, while France and the rest of the Quest question the legitimacy of Nigeria's government. It is this government with which the French removal had to be negotiated. This has dealt another blow to France's colonial influence in West Africa. Mali and Burkina Faso between 2020 and 2022 had severed military ties with France, with a complete withdrawal occurring in Mali in August of 2022 and Burkina Faso in February 2023. The withdrawal of French troops came after many popular protests were held in each nation's capital condemning the failure of France to effectively stop the Islamist insurgencies. In fact, many people throughout these popular protests expressed similar sentiment alongside the transitional government, pointing to an increase of Islamic insurgencies which spread through the Sahel under France's deployment of troops into the region. The West and Western-backed ECOWAS attempt to criticize, sanction, and demonize the foreign steps being taken by the newly formed AES. Despite the backlash, it is clear that the transitional government of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are supported by people's movements and organizations. Thousands of supporters alongside these movements hail these moves as the correct step towards an anti-imperialist path that will bring dignity, economic, and political security to the people living in Sahel. All right. Man, sorry, I'm terrible with butchering these foreign words and names. Let's see here. Learn how to say his name again. That will bring dignity, economic, and political security. Traoré. Say his name again. Sahel. Traoré and Sahel. Sahel and Traoré. All right. My opinion, yeah. They have the freedom to make the deals that they want. Niger and the rest of them, governments of Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger. Yeah, they have the right to be independent and choose how to make their own laws and work out deals with other nations. As you can see, it's unfortunate, but if you want to paint people like Russia or the Russian government as the imperialist monster for giving them thousands and thousands of pounds of wheat in a deal instead of coercing them through sanctions and war, yeah, then there's something rotten with your brain. You need to analyze and check your moral compass as to what is the more saner path here. Again, not saying that Russia's perfect and not defending them entirely here, but they're making deals. They're working out and stabilizing the regions, perhaps. tit for tat, right? But what we don't see here is Russia bombarding them for resources, as imperialist systems like capitalist America has for generations. Uh, not familiar with this issue as much either, but the the description in the article is self-explanatory. Um, and I am supportive of what's happening here. Hopefully, this leads to more peace in the regions of West Africa. Uh, and we can see what is the area they were talking about here. Uh, let's see. What is the area? The migration through the Agadez hub. Yeah, good. Good that they stopped that policy and that they're creating their own. Personally, I have no issues with migration. I have no issues. I am not a big nationalist. I am not a big patriot of any nation. I think borders are dumb, and borders are systems created for people to control other people. Uh, the more you read history, the more you read into how the power struggles through empires throughout the ages, you start understanding that these borders are just created by powerful people, just like history is written by the winners, uh, practically by the most ghoulish people in the world. The same borders are usually redrawn by the winners and the most ghoulish people throughout history. Um, do I like personally when it comes to Africa? I feel a lot of damage has been done in Africa. Uh, a lot of the resources have been plundered, and people use stupid reasoning such as manifest destiny or Africans had their own slaves as an excuse as to why it was okay for us to take Africans and make them slaves and spread them across the world as slaves. No, that's not an excuse. I totally don't support that. Uh, but I also am not a big supporter of all these current borders. Uh, when you're talking about migration of people, my simplest example is like, hey, you want to stop people from migrating from Venezuela into the United States and into Europe? Maybe stop sanctioning Venezuela. Maybe stop the embargoes. Maybe stop trying to destabilize their economy. They've only started coming recently within the last decade because of the attempted interventions of the U.S. into Venezuela, interventions that can be proven that U.S. were involved in, right? And those who don't want to read into it or look into it, it's your loss because that makes you the one that isn't hungry for knowledge and truth. So your ideals are not that powerful or strong to begin with. If you're not willing to read and understand what's happening, if you're not willing to look into the truth because you think it might shake your worldview, then your worldview is just weak and it can't be defended. Yeah, blissful ignorance, right? What else can we talk about today on ECOWAS? This is an interesting topic. I don't know much about Africa, but I do have this worldview about working class solidarity. Yeah, uh, and if the African governments think that France's influence has been a bad influence and hasn't really benefited West Africa, then it's time for a change. And that's just that, right? Okay. So these are my comments and thoughts for the week. Uh, we went definitely almost 90 minutes today. Uh, I hope there's more articles on this. Um, I'm not sure there's any links, hashtag Africa imperialism ECOWAS. Okay, so there's a lot into ECOWAS likely. Let's see what happens when I click on the ECOWAS link here. Here we go. Military Queen. Okay, so there's only one article on this, so there'll probably be a lot more on ECOWAS. There's probably more articles on Africa. I'm not sure. Crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Tropas francesas expulsadas de Niger mientras la región se levanta contra el imperialismo. Okay, so that's in Spanish. That's awesome. Yeah, so there is more articles on this actually. Whenever I can do a general search. This is an awesome website, by the way, Liberation News. There is other leftist publications out there. I think another one that's really good is Socialist Alternative. They write some great articles as well. Gravitated towards Liberation News, which is from the Party of Socialism and Liberation, because I gravitate towards their messaging a lot more. I've been really interested in what they have to say in regards to leftist movements. Let's see, did I click on the wrong button here? Took me somewhere else. Let's get here. I know there's like a search button. I probably can't see it because, oh, here it is, search. Let's type ECOWAS. Let's see what that brings up. Okay, so if you type ECOWAS, I guess it wasn't hashtag before, but now it is. But if you type ECOWAS, there's a lot more articles. There's today's article that we read. And then there's an article on August 11th, 2023. Nigeria's new government defies imperialist-backed ECOWAS war threats. Okay. October 26th, the kidnapping of Alex Saab and the human cost of U.S. hegemony. That's in Venezuela. French troops driven out of Niger as region rises up against imperialism. Okay, that was last year's article on September 27th. What is the new alliance of Sahel states? Sahel states challenging neocolonialism in West Africa, and that was September 21st, 2023. Who's Who in Niger crisis. All right, so there definitely is a few articles in regards to this. I'm attracted to this one because it's a big plane, and I like big planes. With grip over West Africa slipping, imperialist powers considers invasion in Niger. Okay, so these are a few. Well, this one's probably outdated. I don't know. I don't know if they're still considering invasions, but according to the article we just read today, that kind of caught us up. There is no imminent invasion, and Nigeria is just moving along, making new deals. I think a lot of these new deals have to do with BRICS, which is the alliances with Russia and China to exchange resources and maybe create a new dollar or something like that. I don't know. I think I support it. I support alliances with nations as opposed to oppression by nations and interventions by nations, and what America does. All right. Well, that's it for today. Again, everybody, thank you very much for reading along on liberationnews.org. If you have any comments or questions, you can always drop them on the comments and we can read them. Eventually, hopefully, we'll have some guests and some multiple people doing read-alongs. Everybody have a good night and stay safe, stay warm. If you're in